I've always thought I had a pretty solid marriage. We'd been together for nearly 8 years, married for 5, and on the surface, things seemed fine. Sure, there were the usual small arguments, who left the lights on, whose turn it was to deal with bills, but nothing out of the ordinary. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Lately, though, I started noticing little things. My wife, let's call her Rachel, was suddenly distant. She spent more time on her phone, often locking herself in our bedroom just to read, and she laughed at messages I couldn't see. I shrugged it off at first, convincing myself I was overreacting, that maybe work stress or something else was making her withdrawn. But that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Something felt off. It wasn't dramatic yet, no fights, no shouting matches, just this creeping sense of unease. And that's always worse, isn't it? The quiet before the storm. It started with small, almost invisible signs. Rachel would suddenly leave the room if my phone rang, even though she used to answer calls from her work sometimes. She started being secretive about her schedule, business meetings popping up late in the evenings that I never knew about. Then came the texts. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but one night I noticed her phone buzzing repeatedly while she was in the kitchen. She left it on the counter, screen facing down, and for some reason, I glanced at it. Just a flash of a name, someone I didn't recognize, followed by a string of emojis that made my stomach twist. I quickly looked away, telling myself it was probably nothing. But deep down, I knew. That gnawing suspicion I'd been ignoring? It had teeth now. That weekend, I tried to brush it off, focusing on work, trying to keep the quiet from turning into paranoia. But my eyes kept catching her behavior, laughing at invisible conversations, disappearing into our bedroom for calls, and the faint, almost imperceptible tension in her voice whenever I asked a simple question. Something had changed, and I was starting to realize it wasn't just her mood, it was something bigger. It hit me one evening in the worst possible way. I got home early from work, just a quick errand, and the house was quiet. Too quiet. Usually, I'd hear Rachel humming in the kitchen or the TV in the living room. But this time, nothing. I walked toward the bedroom, and that's when I saw it. Her laptop was open on the bed, her email and chat app logged in. And there it was, messages between her and a guy I didn't know. Flirty, suggestive, completely intimate. My hands shook as I scrolled, feeling like I was watching my marriage crumble in real time. There were plans for dinner dates, hints at meetups I'd never been invited to, jokes and pet names I wasn't part of. I dropped the laptop and sat on the floor, numb. My mind kept repeating the same questions. How long? Why? Was I that blind? It was surreal, like some terrible scene in a movie, but this wasn't fiction. This was my life unraveling in front of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, heart hammering, mind racing. When Rachel finally came home, casually humming like nothing was wrong, something inside me snapped. I demanded to know who the guy was. At first, she laughed nervously, but with that sharp edge that always made my stomach turn. "What are you talking about?" she said, rolling her eyes. I could see it in her posture, the way her voice hit that fake calm. It was rehearsed, defensive. I pulled out the laptop, showing her the messages. Her face changed instantly, from annoyance to panic, then to a mask of indignation. "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this," she snapped. "It's not what it looks like. You're overreacting. You always overreact." The excuses started flowing: work stress, needing attention, he's just a friend, you're paranoid, even implying that I was the one acting guilty without reason. Every word was a lie, and yet she said it with such confidence I almost doubted myself. Almost. After that confrontation, I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or just disappear. I felt every emotion at once: anger, betrayal, disbelief, shame. The Rachel I thought I knew, the woman I trusted completely, had been living a secret life right under my nose. I spent hours replaying moments in my head: her laughter over the phone, the late meetings, the casual kisses in the kitchen that now felt like lies. Every memory suddenly had a shadow over it, like my life had been edited out of reality. Sleep was impossible. I wandered the house at night, staring at walls that had once felt like home, now feeling like a cage. My friends tried to call, but I couldn't speak. I didn't want advice, I wanted to understand how someone I loved could choose deceit over us. By morning, the anger had turned into a heavy, dull ache. I realized this wasn't going away, and neither was the damage. I was staring down a choice I never imagined I'd have to make: fight for a marriage built on lies, or walk away from the woman I'd once thought was my everything. Just when I thought I had a grip on my emotions, another bomb dropped. A week after the confrontation, I came home early again, force of habit, I guess, and found a receipt in the trash. Dinner for two. Not a casual friend kind of dinner. Expensive. Intimate. And dated the night before. I felt bile rise. I confronted Rachel immediately. She froze for a split second, then deflected like a pro. Oh, that? I was meeting a colleague. Work dinner. You don't need to make a big deal out of it, she said, voice dripping with irritation. But the look in her eyes told a different story. A mix of guilt, defiance, and that brazen arrogance that had always made her charming but now felt like a weapon against me. The lie was thin, almost laughable, but she said it with such conviction that I almost wondered if I was losing my mind. Almost. This wasn't just an affair, it was an ongoing performance. And I was the only one still in the audience who didn't have a script. I hit my limit a few days later. Rachel came home late again, heels in hand, makeup smudged just enough to look careless, not guilty. She walked past me like I was furniture. That did it. I asked her calmly, somehow, if she was still seeing him. She sighed loudly, like I was an inconvenience. Why are you obsessed with this? She snapped. Then she turned it around on me, accusing me of being controlling, insecure, emotionally absent. According to her, my flaws had pushed her into someone else's arms. Something inside me cracked. I realized she wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending anymore. The lies weren't about hiding the affair, they were about justifying it. And standing there, listening to her rewrite our marriage like I was the villain, I understood that I was fighting alone. That night, I slept on the couch for the first time. Not out of anger, but clarity. Sleeping on the couch didn't bring peace. It brought silence, and that silence was brutal. In the middle of the night, it all hit me at once. The weight of it. The finality. I stared at the ceiling and felt something inside me give way. I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet, broken breathing, like my body didn't even have the energy to fall apart properly. I wasn't just mourning my marriage. I was mourning the version of my life I thought was real. By morning, I was hollowed out. Rachel barely looked at me. She acted irritated, like my pain was an inconvenience she didn't sign up for. That hurt almost more than the cheating. I realized then that whatever love she once had for me was gone or buried so deep it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. And for the first time since this started, I wondered what it would feel like to stop fighting altogether. I thought I already knew the worst of it. Turns out, I was wrong. That afternoon, her phone rang while she was in the shower. I wasn't trying to snoop, I honestly wasn't, but the name on the screen caught my eye. Same guy. Again. A message followed almost immediately: last night was worth the risk. When can I see you again? When Rachel came out, I didn't raise my voice. I just held up the phone and asked her one last time to tell me the truth. She didn't hesitate. She lied straight to my face. Said he was obsessed, that she'd already cut him off, that I was twisting things because I wanted to be hurt. That was the moment it clicked. Not because of the message, but because of how easily the lie came out. No fear. No shame. Just practice. I realized she'd been lying longer than I'd been doubting, and probably longer than I'd ever know. Something inside me went cold. Not angry. Not sad. Just done. That night, I made a choice I'd been avoiding since the beginning. I packed a bag, not dramatically, not in a rush. Just enough clothes for a few days. Each folded shirt felt like a quiet goodbye to the life I thought I had. Rachel noticed, of course. She scoffed and asked if this was another performance. I told her I needed space. She laughed and said I'd be back by the weekend, like she knew me better than I knew myself. That hurt, but it also sealed it. Walking out the door felt unreal. No yelling. No tears from her. Just the sound of the lock clicking behind me and the sudden understanding that love shouldn't feel like constant survival. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't stay where honesty was optional and respect was gone. The days after I left blurred together. I stayed with a friend, sleeping in a spare room that smelled like detergent and unfamiliar walls. It should have felt temporary, but something about it felt permanent in a way I couldn't explain. Rachel texted me like nothing serious had happened. One minute she was angry, accusing me of abandoning her. The next, she was sweet, asking when I'd come home. No apology. No accountability. Just mood swings and manipulation. I stopped responding. Not out of spite, but because every message pulled me back into the chaos. Without her voice in my head, I started seeing things clearly. The gaslighting. The contempt. The way I'd been shrinking myself just to keep the peace. It hurt, but it was quieter. And that quiet felt like the first step toward healing. Distance has a way of stripping things down to the facts. Without Rachel around, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The truth was ugly but clear. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern. A choice she made over and over while I trusted her blindly. I realized how often I'd ignored my instincts just to avoid conflict. How many times I'd accepted half answers because the full truth scared me. Loving her had slowly trained me to doubt myself, and that was a harder pill to swallow than the affair itself. There were moments I still missed her, not who she was, but who I believed she was. That version of her didn't exist anymore, maybe never had. Accepting that felt like mourning someone who was still alive. But with that acceptance came something unexpected: relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I had just loved someone who didn't love me the same way back. Letting go didn't happen all at once. It came in small, quiet moments. Deleting old photos. Packing away gifts that once meant everything and now meant nothing. Each small act felt like ripping off a thin layer of skin, but underneath it, I was healing. Rachel tried one last time to pull me back in. She showed up unannounced, angry and emotional, blaming me for giving up too easily. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she admit what she'd done. Standing there, listening to her twist the story again, I finally felt detached. Like I was watching someone else's mess instead of drowning in my own. I told her I was done. No explanations. No debate. Just the truth. She stormed out, slamming the door, and instead of collapsing afterward, I felt lighter. That's when I knew I was really letting go, not of her, but of the hope that she'd ever be the person I needed her to be. Life didn't magically get better after that, but it did get simpler. I found my own place, a small apartment that felt empty at first, then slowly started feeling like mine. No tension. No walking on eggshells. Just space to exist without being questioned or blamed. I focused on routine. Work. Exercise. Long walks at night when my head got too loud. Some days were harder than others, especially when memories crept in uninvited. But they didn't destroy me anymore, they passed through. I started trusting my instincts again. That alone felt like reclaiming something I'd lost years ago. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was moving. And that mattered more than pretending everything was fine. For the first time since the betrayal, I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding. This experience changed me in ways I'm still unpacking. I learned that love without honesty isn't love, it's control. I learned that constant confusion is a warning sign, not a personal failure. And I learned that staying loyal to someone who lies to you isn't strength, it's self-abandonment. If there's one thing I tell anyone in a similar situation, it's this: trust what your gut is telling you, even when it's inconvenient. Don't let someone rewrite reality just to avoid taking responsibility. You deserve clarity, respect, and peace, bare minimum things I didn't realize I'd been living without. I didn't lose everything when my marriage ended. I lost the illusion. And in its place, I found myself again.